The millionaire's quadruplets drove away. Every nanny until she arrived and did the impossible. I never thought I'd walk into a mansion that felt colder than winter itself. My name is Clara, and after years of struggling between part-time jobs, caring for children was the only thing that made me feel alive. Maybe because I grew up in an orphanage myself, I knew what loneliness looked like in a child's eyes. So when the agency called and said, "We have an urgent position, but no one lasts more than a week," I hesitated. "Why?" I asked, clutching my worn-out handbag. "4 boys," the lady said. "Quadruplets, 8 years old. Their father is a millionaire, Mr. Ethan Reed, widower, strict. The boys. Well, they've chased away 6 nannies in 2 months. 6 nannies. 2 months. That sounded like trouble, or heartbreak. But something in me whispered, "Go, Clara." I needed the job. I needed a roof over my head, and deep down I wanted to help. When I arrived at the estate, the iron gates opened slowly. The mansion loomed ahead, white stone gleaming under the morning sun, windows reflecting the clouds. A fountain splashed in the middle of the driveway, but the air felt empty, as if laughter had long been banned. A tall man in a navy suit opened the door before I even knocked. His grey eyes were sharp, unreadable. "You're the new nanny," he said flatly. "Yes, sir. Clara Hayes. I'm Ethan Reed. Come in." "But I'll be honest, I don't expect you to last." His tone stung, but I smiled politely. "I'll try my best, Mr. Reed." He didn't smile back. "We'll see about that." Inside, the house was silent. Too silent for a home with children. No giggles, no footsteps, just the faint hum of a clock. Then suddenly, a crash echoed down the hallway, followed by laughter. Mr. Reed sighed heavily. There they are. He led me to a large playroom where 4 identical boys were having a paint war. Blue, red, and yellow streaks splattered across the walls and each other. They looked like little tornadoes of energy. "Boys!" he barked. "Stop that right now!" They froze. 4 sets of gray-blue eyes turned toward us. His eyes, I realized. One of them, the smallest, smirked. "Another nanny?" Another said. "Let's see how long this one lasts." The third whispered, "Bet she quits before Friday." The fourth, who seemed quiet, just looked at me, not with mischief, but sadness. Mr. Reed rubbed his temples. "Clara, these are Mason, Miles, Max, and Micah. Boys, this is Miss Hayes. She'll be taking care of you." "No, she won't," said Mason, the boldest. "We don't need a nanny." "I see," I said softly, walking toward them. "But maybe a friend." They looked at each other, surprised by my tone. I knelt down to their level. "You don't have to like me yet. But let's at least eat something, okay?" Miles crossed his arms. "We already had breakfast." "Really? Then why are there cookie crumbs on your shirts?" They blinked, caught off guard, then burst into laughter. Even Mr. Reed's mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. That afternoon I made pasta. Simple, warm, comforting. The boys sat reluctantly, poking their food, whispering to each other. Then I said, "Let's play a game. For every bite you eat, I'll tell a story." "A real one?" Micah's eyes widened. "Real?" "Yes, about a girl who grew up in a big house, but it wasn't hers." They leaned closer. I told them about my time in the orphanage, how I used to dream of a family that would never come. I didn't make it sad. I made it funny. They laughed, and for the first time I heard their real laughter, innocent, free. I looked up and saw Mr. Reed standing by the door, watching quietly. His face had softened. Later that evening, after the boys went to bed, he found me in the kitchen washing dishes. "They actually ate," he said, sounding almost amazed. "They just needed someone to listen," I replied. He studied me for a moment. "Every nanny said that before quitting. They think it's about attention. It's not that simple." I turned off the tap. "Then what is it, Mr. Reed?" He looked away. "They lost their mother 2 years ago. Cancer. Since then, they've been angry. At me. At everyone." My heart sank. "I'm sorry." He nodded slightly, his voice low. "They used to laugh like that when she was here." I didn't know what to say, so I just whispered, "Maybe they can again." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw more than the cold, distant businessman. I saw a man drowning quietly in guilt and grief. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They are not bad boys. They're just broken. And broken hearts don't heal with rules. They heal with love. The next morning, chaos awaited me. Spilled milk, missing shoes, and Mason trying to feed cereal to the dog. But I didn't yell. Instead, I laughed. Okay, team, let's fix this together. Their eyes widened. No one had ever called them a team before. By noon, we had the house somewhat tidy, the boys calmer. I even got them to read for half an hour. Ethan came home early that day, expecting the usual disaster. But instead, he found 4 boys sitting at the table, helping me mix cookie dough. They looked up and shouted, "Dad! We're baking!" He froze in the doorway, stunned. Mason grinned. "Miss Hayes says cookies make people happy," Miles added. "Even dads who don't smile much." Ethan blinked, speechless. Then, without meaning to, he chuckled. Just a small sound, but it filled the room like sunlight. That night, after the boys went to bed, he found me again in the kitchen. "I don't know what you're doing, Clara," he said, "but—" "Thank you," I smiled. "Just trying to make them smile again." He looked toward the stairs where their laughter still echoed faintly. "You did. You really did." And in that moment, something unspoken passed between us. A fragile understanding between 2 people trying to rebuild what life had broken. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because love, in any form, always begins quietly when you least expect it. When I woke up on my 3rd morning in the mansion, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the floor. The house, for once, was quiet. Too quiet. That kind of silence usually means one thing when you're caring for children. Trouble. I hurried down the hallway, calling softly, "Boys?" No answer. The playroom was empty. The kitchen was spotless. Even the dog looked innocent, which was suspicious in itself. Then I heard it, laughter echoing from the backyard. I ran outside and froze. The quadruplets were on the roof of the small garden shed, waving makeshift flags made from pillowcases. Mason shouted, "Captain Mason declares independence from all nannies." Miles yelled, "Long live freedom!" And Max, the smallest one, was halfway through sliding down a rain gutter. "Max!" I gasped. "Don't move!" They all froze. For a moment, I could feel my heart pounding louder than the wind. "I swear, boys," I said calmly, "if you wanted to play pirates, there are safer ships than the roof." They giggled. Mason called, "You can't catch us." "Oh, can't I?" I replied, pretending to crack my knuckles. That was enough. They jumped down one by one, laughing hysterically as I chased them around the yard until we all collapsed into the grass, breathless. Then I noticed Micah, the quiet one, wasn't laughing. He sat at the edge of the garden, staring at a small patch of flowers. His eyes looked lost, far away. I walked over gently. "Hey," I said, "you don't like pirates?" He shook his head. "Mom used to plant flowers here." I knelt beside him. The flowers were half wilted, forgotten. "They're still here, see? You just have to take care of them again." He looked up. "You know how?" "Sure," I smiled. "Maybe we can bring them back together." That was the first time Micah smiled at me. A shy, broken smile, but real. When Ethan came home that evening, the boys ran to him, something they hadn't done in months. "Dad, Miss Hayes helped us plant flowers." He looked stunned. "Flowers? Yes," Miles said proudly. Micah said Mom liked them. Ethan's face changed, a flicker of pain, then gratitude. He turned to me quietly after the boys ran upstairs. "You found her garden." "I didn't know it was hers," I said softly. "It was. She loved it. After she died, I couldn't bear to touch it." For a moment he stood there, his eyes fixed on the patch of earth outside the window. "They haven't mentioned her name in over a year," he whispered. "Until now." Something in his voice broke me. "Maybe," I said, "they were just waiting for someone to listen." The next week was both beautiful and chaotic. The boys began to open up, one tantrum at a time. They tested me constantly. Mason hid my phone in the fish tank. Miles tried to help with laundry and dyed all of Ethan's shirts pink. Max poured maple syrup into my shoes, but every punishment I gave was mixed with understanding. "You'll help clean it and we'll talk about why," I'd say. No yelling, no threats, just patience. By the 4th week, the house felt alive again. The walls echoed with laughter. The garden was blooming, and every morning began with a chorus of, "Good morning, Miss Hayes." Yet, I could feel Ethan's distance. He was polite, grateful even, but guarded, like a man afraid to feel again. Sometimes I'd see him watching from the study door as I read bedtime stories or braided Max's messy hair. His expression always carried a storm, admiration mixed with something heavier. One evening I brought him tea. His office was dim, lined with books and silent portraits. Papers covered his desk, contracts, letters, the usual armor of a man who hid behind work. "You don't have to do that," he said when I set the cup down. "Do what?" "Be kind to me. It's not in your job description," I smiled. Neither was planting flowers, but here we are. He looked at me, the corner of his mouth twitching. "You're different. I'll take that as a compliment." There was a pause, the kind that feels like a held breath. Then he said, almost to himself, "I used to think no one could fill the silence she left behind. But lately it's not so silent anymore." I didn't know what to say. My heart beat faster than it should have. "Mr. Reed," I whispered, "sometimes silence doesn't need to be filled, just shared." For the first time he smiled, a real one. It softened every line on his face. A few nights later, a thunderstorm hit the city. The lights flickered and the wind howled around the house. I was checking windows when I heard soft crying from upstairs. I found Micah sitting on his bed hugging a stuffed bear. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he whispered. Mom used to sing when it stormed. It made the thunder go away. My throat tightened. I sat beside him and began to hum softly, an old lullaby from my orphanage days. One by one, the other boys came in, curling up beside me, listening in silence. When I finished, they were all asleep, peaceful, for the first time. As I turned to leave, I saw Ethan standing in the doorway. His eyes glistened in the dim light. "You sang to them," he said quietly. "They were scared," he nodded, his voice trembling. "So was I." The storm outside seemed to fade. Inside, something warmer took its place, fragile but real. That night, for the first time in years, Ethan didn't sleep in his office. He stayed in the room next to the boys, just listening to their soft breathing. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself becoming part of their little world, their games, their chaos, their laughter. But every moment of joy carried a shadow of something unspoken. One morning, while tidying the study, I noticed a sealed envelope on Ethan's desk addressed to Reed and Cumber Legal Affairs Division. I wasn't the type to pry, but the words custody review caught my eye. That evening I gathered the courage to ask, "Mr. Reed, are you planning to send the boys somewhere?" He stiffened. "Who told you that?" "No one. I just saw the envelope." He exhaled deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "My late wife's parents filed for joint custody. They believe I can't handle the boys." I felt a jolt of panic. "But you're doing so well now, they're healing." He shook his head. "The court doesn't see progress. They see reports from every nanny who quit." I understood then why he had built walls around himself, why he seemed so afraid to hope. Losing his wife had broken him. Losing his sons would destroy him. "We can prove them wrong," I said firmly. He looked up surprised. "We?" "Yes, you, me, and the boys, as a family." Something flickered in his eyes. Not just gratitude, but trust. The kind of trust that only grows when someone finally believes in you again. A few days later, the boys overheard a phone call they weren't meant to. Miles came running to me, panicked. "They're taking us away, Miss Hayes." "Grandpa said so?" My heart sank. "Who told you that?" "Mason heard Dad shouting on the phone." I found Ethan in the living room, pacing. His hands were shaking, his voice raw with anger. "They think I'm unfit. They said no child psychologist in the world can fix this household." He stopped when he saw me, eyes filled with despair. "Clara, I can't lose them." I walked up to him, steady and calm. "Then you won't. But we need to show them, not tell them, what love looks like again." He stared at me as if I'd said something he hadn't heard in years. "Love," he murmured. "It sounds simple when you say it." "It is," I whispered. "It just needs practice." And from that day, I made it my mission to do the impossible. not just to tame 4 mischievous boys, but to rebuild a family that had forgotten how to love out loud. I didn't know then that the test ahead would be far greater than any tantrum, storm or court hearing, a test that would either bind us forever or tear us apart. The day I realized how much those boys meant to me, it wasn't because of their laughter, it was because of their tears. It began on a Sunday morning. The sun was warm, the garden full of life, and the boys were racing their toy cars across the patio. Ethan had gone out for a meeting with his lawyer. Everything seemed peaceful, until a black car pulled into the driveway. A man and woman stepped out, elegant, stern, and unmistakably out of place among the noise and joy of children. The woman wore pearls and carried herself like royalty. The man's silver hair gleamed in the light. I didn't need an introduction. They were her parents, the late Mrs. Reed's father and mother. "Good morning," I said, wiping my hands nervously. The woman gave me a thin smile. "You must be the new nanny." "I'm Vivian Sterling, and this is my husband, Charles." "Yes, ma'am." "Where is Ethan?" "He's out at the moment." She looked past me, her gaze falling on the boys. Mason was helping Max fix his toy, both giggling. Vivian's eyes softened for a moment, then hardened again. "They look better," she admitted. "You must be doing something right." "For now," I nodded politely. "They're wonderful boys, ma'am." She sighed. "Wonderful and wild. They need proper upbringing, structure, not games in the dirt." Her words stung, but I said nothing. Then Micah noticed them. He froze, then slowly walked over. "Grandma?" he whispered. Vivian knelt, forcing a smile. "Hello, sweetheart." For a moment, it was beautiful, a fragile reunion. But when she reached to hug him, he hesitated, then pulled back. "You didn't come on my birthday," he said. The air froze. Vivian's eyes flickered with guilt. "We were traveling, dear." Mason stepped forward, protective. "You never come," Charles frowned. "Don't talk to your grandmother like that, young man." But the damage was done. The boys turned away, retreating toward the garden. Vivian's face tightened. "I see Ethan hasn't taught them manners." "Actually," I said quietly, "they've just learned honesty." Her eyes snapped to me. "You may think you're helping, Miss Hayes, but you're only delaying the inevitable. The court will decide what's best for them, and for Ethan." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" "You'll find out soon enough," she said coolly, then turned and left. That night, Ethan came home looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. "They came," he said, voice low. "Yes. I should have warned you. They filed for temporary custody. Court hearings in 3 weeks." The words hit me like thunder. "Temporary custody? Ethan, that could mean—" "I know," he interrupted. "It could mean losing them." He sank into the chair, head in his hands. I tried explaining. "But they think I'm emotionally unstable, that I work too much, that I can't provide what the boys need." I wanted to say they're wrong, but part of me knew he was broken. Still healing, still lost between grief and guilt, but he was trying, and that mattered more than perfection ever could. I took a deep breath. "Then we'll show them, Ethan. Not through words, through love. We'll show them a home that feels alive again." He looked up, eyes tired but hopeful. "Clara, why do you care so much?" I hesitated, because I hadn't told him the truth. That night, I sat on my bed, holding an old photo, faded, creased, but precious. It showed me as a child standing beside another little girl, both in identical orphanage uniforms. Her name was Lily. We were inseparable, until one winter when she was adopted, by a kind woman named Grace Sterling. Yes, the same family. Lily had been Ethan's late wife. When I first saw his name in the job file, I hadn't connected the dots. But the moment I saw those boys, their eyes, their laughter, I knew. They were Lily's children. My childhood friend's legacy. I never told anyone. Not the agency, not Ethan. I didn't want them to think I took the job out of sentiment or guilt. I wanted to earn their trust honestly, but now with the custody battle ahead, I wondered if hiding it was a mistake. Maybe the truth could save them, or destroy everything I'd built. The next morning, I gathered the boys around the kitchen table. "We're going to make something special," I said. A memory box, they blinked. What's that? Asked Miles. It's a box full of moments that make you smile. Drawings, pictures, things you never want to forget. They loved the idea instantly. We spent the whole day gathering little treasures. A painted rock from the garden, a broken toy car, a photo of their mom, even a cookie shaped like a heart. When Ethan saw it, he knelt beside them, eyes glistening. What's all this? Our memory box, said Mason proudly. So we don't forget Mom. Ethan swallowed hard. You won't, boys. Not ever. He looked at me afterward and whispered, You're doing the impossible, Clara. I smiled softly. We're doing it together. But peace never lasts long in houses built from heartbreak. A few days later, the boys overheard another argument, this time between Ethan and his in-laws. You think we'll stand by while our grandchildren live with a man who hides behind a nanny? Vivian's voice snapped. She's not just a nanny, Ethan shot back. She's family. Those words made my heart flutter, but also ache. Because deep down, I knew the world wouldn't see me as family, just help. The argument ended with slammed doors and broken trust. The boys, frightened and confused, acted out worse than ever. Mason refused to eat. Miles threw tantrums. Max cried himself to sleep. And Micah, the one who always stayed quiet, began wetting the bed again. I stayed up every night comforting them, whispering stories, holding their hands until they slept. Sometimes I'd find Ethan outside their door, just standing there, helpless. One night, he said softly, You shouldn't have to do this alone. I'm not, I replied. We're all just finding our way back. He looked at me then, and something shifted. His gaze wasn't just grateful anymore. It was tender. But I couldn't let my heart believe it. Not now. Not with everything at stake. As the court date drew closer, tension filled the house like thick fog. Vivian began sending investigators, people who took notes, photographs, even recorded conversations. I tried to ignore them, but it made the boys nervous. They're spying on us, whispered Mason one evening. No, I said gently. They're just making sure everyone's okay. Then why do they make Dad sad? I had no answer. That night, while cleaning the living room, I found Ethan sitting alone, staring at an old piano. Do you play? I asked softly. Not anymore. Why not? She used to. I hesitated, then sat beside him. Maybe it's time someone played again. He glanced at me. You play? A little. I started to play a simple tune, the same lullaby I used for the boys. The melody filled the silence gently, wrapping the room in something warm. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing slowly, and for a moment, it felt like healing. When I stopped, he whispered, You remind me of her. Because I sing? No. Because you make this house feel alive again. The next morning, something unexpected happened. The boys gathered in the hallway, whispering. When I walked in, they straightened up. Miss Hayes, said Mason, can we ask you something? Of course. Will you stay with us forever? My throat tightened. Forever's a big word, boys. Miles crossed his arms. You're not allowed to quit, ever. Max nodded solemnly. We'll tell Dad to make it a rule. I laughed softly. You don't need rules for love, remember? Then Micah looked up, his voice trembling. We love you, Miss Hayes. That was the moment my heart broke and mended at the same time. I knelt, hugging them all. I love you too. So much. Ethan saw us from across the hallway. His expression said everything words couldn't. Pride, relief, and maybe love. But fate, as always, had other plans. That evening I received a letter at the mansion, official and cold. It was from the Sterling's attorney, Miss Clara Hayes. It has come to our attention that you have personal connections to the late Mrs. Lily Reed. Your past association compromises your role as caretaker and may influence the outcome of the custody hearing. You are hereby requested to resign immediately. My hands trembled as I read it. They had found out. I stood there, heart racing, the sound of the boys' laughter echoing upstairs. The very laughter I might never hear again. When Ethan entered the room moments later, I didn't know how to tell him that the secret I had buried, the truth that tied me to his late wife, could now destroy everything we'd built together. For the first time since I'd entered the mansion, laughter echoed in the hallways. Not the polite, forced kind that comes from expensive dinners or business calls, but the pure, unrestrained laughter of children. The quadruplets were no longer four storms waiting to happen. They had begun to turn into sunlight. One morning, as I walked into the playroom, I saw something I'd never imagined possible. Ethan, the quietest one, was sitting cross-legged on the floor, showing his siblings how to build a tower with blocks. Noah was actually listening. Ava was clapping. Lily was leaning against my knee, humming the little tune I had taught her. When the tower fell, instead of screams or accusations, they all burst into giggles. I froze. Not because I was surprised, but because in that moment, it hit me. They were healing. Later that day, Mr. Harrison, the billionaire father, stood in the doorway of the playroom. He was dressed sharply as always, phone in hand, but his eyes weren't behind glass anymore. He was watching his children like a man seeing life for the first time in years. When I noticed him, I smiled faintly and said, "They built a castle today." He didn't answer right away. He just stepped in slowly, almost cautiously, as if afraid the laughter might disappear if he got too close. "How did you do it?" he finally asked, his voice low. I looked at him, then at the children. "I didn't," I said softly. "They did. They just needed someone to listen before they spoke." He nodded, eyes glistening just a little, and I realized that behind his success, his empire, his control, was a man who had lost his family long before his wife passed. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Harrison began joining us, at first just standing nearby, then sitting for breakfast, then reading stories before bed. The kids were hesitant, watching him as if unsure whether this new version of their father was real. One night, Ava whispered, "Is he going to leave again?" I knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart. I think he's finally come home." When I said it, Mr. Harrison was standing right behind us. I hadn't realized it. His voice trembled. "She's right." And then, for the first time since I met him, he sat down and held his children, all four of them, close. That night, after they were asleep, he found me in the kitchen. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You don't have to," I replied. "They just needed their father back." He gave a small smile. "You sound like you know what it's like to lose someone." I hesitated. The truth was I did. Years ago, I had lost my younger brother, the only family I had, to a car accident. I'd been working 2 jobs that night, saving money for our future. I missed his last call. That guilt had followed me ever since. So I looked at him and said, "Sometimes, people just need one more chance to hold on." He didn't speak again. But in his eyes, I saw something change. Something softer. Something human. A few days later, there was a storm. Heavy rain, thunder, the kind that makes every shadow dance on the walls. The power flickered out, and the kids came running, terrified. Without thinking, I gathered them around the fireplace and started telling them stories. About courage, about light, about how every storm passes. Mr. Harrison came down, soaked from checking the generator. He froze when he saw us, 5 silhouettes glowing by the fire, 4 heads resting against my lap. He quietly took a seat beside us, the storm still roaring outside. As I continued my story, I saw him watching. Not me, but the children. His lips were curved in a rare smile, his hand resting gently on Ethan's shoulder. The thunder rolled again, and Ava reached for my hand. Without realizing it, Mr. Harrison reached for it too. Our fingers brushed, and neither of us moved them away. For a brief, fragile second, it felt like peace had finally entered that house. The next morning, the housekeeper, Mrs. Gray, whispered to me with a knowing smile, "The master hasn't smiled like that since his wife passed." "Whatever you're doing, my dear." "Don't stop." I didn't know how to reply. I wasn't trying to take anyone's place. I was just doing my job. But that night, as I walked past his study, I heard him speaking softly on the phone. "Yes. Yes, she's different," he said. "The kids adore her. And so do I." There was a pause, then a quiet sigh. "No, I haven't told her." "Not yet." My heart stopped. Was he talking about me? Or was I just hearing what I wanted to hear? That night, as I lay awake in my small room, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the rain still lingered in my mind. The laughter, the touch, the warmth. Maybe I had started caring too much. Maybe I was crossing a line. But deep down, I knew the truth. Somewhere along the way, that house had stopped being a workplace and started feeling like home. Peace never lasts forever, especially in a house that's learned to live in silence and sorrow for so long. For weeks, everything had been beautiful. The children were blooming. Laughter filled every corner, drawings lined the walls, and the house finally felt like a home again. Mr. Harrison, Daniel, had even started leaving work early, helping the kids with homework, and walking with us in the garden after dinner. But happiness has a strange way of testing those who have suffered too long. It doesn't arrive quietly. It stirs up every buried fear that maybe, just maybe, it won't last. It began one morning when a silver car pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a tall, elegant woman, flawless hair, sharp heels, and eyes that measured everything. The children froze at the sight of her. That was Caroline, Daniel's late wife's sister. She had been out of the country for years, managing family affairs. The moment she walked in, she looked around and said coldly, "So, this is what the house looks like now. Toys on the floor and crayons on the walls." Before I could speak, she turned to me. "And you must be the new nanny everyone's talking about." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Emma," I said politely. She stepped closer. "You've certainly made yourself comfortable." Daniel appeared at the top of the stairs then. "Caroline, you should have called before coming." She gave him a hard stare. "I came because people are talking, Daniel." "About her." She pointed at me. The children looked terrified. Ethan whispered, "Don't send her away, please." I knelt down beside them and smiled gently. "It's okay, sweetheart." But inside, my stomach twisted. Caroline's words echoed through the house like a curse. That evening, while Daniel was on a call in his office, Caroline found me in the kitchen. "You think you've saved this family," she said sharply. "But you're just another temporary fix. They've already lost one mother. Don't confuse them into thinking you can take her place." Her words hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they carried some truth. I had grown too close. "I don't want to replace anyone," I said quietly. "I just want them to feel loved," she smirked. "Love? From a nanny?" Then she turned and left, heels clicking against the marble floor. For the first time in months, I felt like a stranger again. The next day, everything changed. I went to pick up the children from school as usual, but when I arrived home, Daniel's lawyer was waiting. "Miss Emma," he said stiffly, handing me an envelope. "Mr. Harrison will speak to you soon, but for now we're required to suspend your employment." Effective immediately, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Suspend? Why?" He looked uncomfortable. "There's been an allegation that you overstepped professional boundaries, that your relationship with Mr. Harrison is inappropriate." My throat tightened. "That's not true. I'm just delivering the message, ma'am." I stood there, the laughter of the children echoing faintly upstairs. Everything I had worked for, every bit of trust, every smile, every hug, vanished in a heartbeat. When Daniel came home later, I was already packing. He looked exhausted, torn between anger and guilt. "Emma, I didn't authorize this," he said quickly. Caroline went behind my back. She told the board I was distracted, that the company's stability is at risk. "So she got what she wanted," I whispered. "She wanted me gone." He reached out, his voice breaking. "Please, just give me a few days to fix this." I shook my head. "It's better if I leave now. For the children's sake. They need stability, not scandal." The silence that followed was unbearable. When I turned to go, he said quietly, "Emma, don't ever think you didn't change us. You did the impossible." I looked at him through tears. "Then promise me one thing. Don't let them forget how to laugh." When I stepped outside with my small suitcase, the children came running, barefoot, crying, clinging to me like I was their world. "Don't go, Miss Emma." Ava sobbed. "Please," shouted Noah, grabbing my skirt. I knelt down, holding all four of them tightly. "You remember what I told you? About storms?" They nodded, crying harder. "Every storm ends," I said softly. "Even this one." I kissed each of them on the forehead one by one. Ethan pressed something into my hand, a small drawing of all of us holding hands under a rainbow. I couldn't speak. I just hugged them one last time and walked toward the gate. Behind me, I could hear Daniel's voice calling my name. But I didn't turn back. Days turned into weeks. I rented a small apartment near the city, trying to find work again. But every house felt too quiet, every child too distant. I missed their laughter, their tiny voices calling me Miss Emma. And though I tried to forget, every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face, the sadness in his eyes when he realized I was gone. One evening, I took out Ethan's drawing and pinned it above my bed. Underneath it, I wrote 3 words on a piece of paper: "Don't stop believing." Then one day, everything changed again. A black car pulled up outside my apartment. I thought it was a mistake until the driver stepped out and handed me a letter, sealed with the Harrison family crest. Inside, in Daniel's handwriting, were just 3 lines. "They haven't laughed since you left. Please come home. Daniel." My hands trembled. Tears blurred the ink. For a long moment, I couldn't move. And then, without thinking twice, I packed my bag. Because sometimes love, in its purest form, isn't about where you work. It's about where you belong. The mansion stood at the end of the long, curved driveway, just as I remembered it, tall, proud, yet strangely quiet. The last time I saw it, the gates had closed behind me with a sound that felt like the end of everything. But today, as the same gates opened once more, something inside me whispered, maybe this is not an ending. Maybe it's a beginning. I stepped out of the car slowly, clutching the letter Daniel had written. The autumn wind brushed against my face, carrying with it the faint laughter of children. Faint, but real. I followed the sound through the familiar garden path, past the oak tree where we used to play hide and seek until I reached the porch. The door opened before I could knock. "Miss Emma." 4 small figures ran toward me: Ethan, Ava, Noah, and Lily. They threw themselves into my arms, and suddenly the world felt right again. "You came back," Ethan cried, his voice trembling with joy. "You promised the storm would end," whispered Lily, tears glistening in her eyes. I laughed and cried at the same time, holding them as if I'd never let go. "And look," I said softly. "The rainbow came after all." When I looked up, Daniel stood in the doorway, not the cold, distant billionaire I had first met, but a man transformed. His eyes held the weight of regret, but also a spark of hope. He walked toward me slowly, stopping just a few steps away. "You shouldn't have had to leave," he said quietly. "I had to," I replied. "They needed their father to fight for them, not a nanny to protect them." He took a deep breath, his voice breaking. "Caroline's gone. She resigned from the board after I confronted her. She said she only wanted to protect my late wife's memory. But she finally understood that I was destroying my children's future by living in the past." I nodded, my heart softening. Sometimes people hurt others when they don't know how to heal themselves. Daniel's eyes met mine. "You taught me that." He motioned for me to come inside. Everything was the same, yet different. The house felt alive again. Sunlight pouring through the tall windows, children's drawings still taped to the walls. On the fireplace mantel sat a framed photo, not of business awards or charity galas, but of us. All of us. I froze. "You kept this," he smiled faintly. "They wouldn't let me take it down. Said it's their favorite memory." I traced the edge of the frame with my fingers. "Mine too." That evening, we sat together by the fireplace, just like the night of the storm. The children drifted off to sleep one by one, their heads resting on soft pillows in my lap. Daniel watched quietly from across the room. When the last of the children fell asleep, he walked closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never told you something," he said. "When you left, I didn't just lose a nanny. I lost the only person who ever saw me for who I was, not what I had." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. You were grieving. You needed time. He shook his head. No, Emma, I was afraid. Afraid to care again. Afraid to love again. But you. He took a step closer. You showed me that love doesn't replace what's lost. It heals what's broken. I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. And you showed me that even broken things can build a family again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with everything we'd left unsaid. And then, gently, he reached out and took my hand, the same way he had that night by the fire. Only this time, I didn't pull away. Weeks passed. Life found its rhythm again. School runs, bedtime stories, family dinners. Except this time, Daniel was part of it all. He laughed freely, cooked breakfast, terribly but with effort, and never missed a single bedtime. And as for me, I no longer felt like an outsider. I was part of something bigger. One crisp winter evening, Daniel called me out to the garden. The snow was falling softly, blanketing everything in white. The children were inside, decorating the tree. He turned to me, hands in his coat pockets, looking almost nervous. I've been thinking, he said, about everything you've done for us. You gave me my children back. You gave me myself back. And I don't ever want to lose that again. He paused, took a small step closer and whispered, Emma, I don't just want you to stay as their nanny. I want you to stay as part of this family, if you'll have us. My breath caught. For a second, I couldn't speak. Then I smiled, tears spilling down my cheeks, and said, I already do. The children burst outside just in time to see us standing together in the falling snow. Ava gasped, Daddy, did you ask her? Noah grinned, Is Miss Emma staying forever? Daniel laughed, a sound full of life. Only if she says yes. I knelt down and pulled the children into my arms. How could I ever say no to you four? They cheered, their laughter echoing into the night. Daniel wrapped his arm gently around my shoulders, his voice warm against the winter air. Welcome home, Emma. Months later, I would look back at that moment, the snow, the laughter, the family that wasn't mine by blood but by love, and realize something powerful. Sometimes, miracles don't come in the form of riches or fame. Sometimes they come quietly, through kindness, patience, and the courage to love again. I had come into that house as a stranger, but I left my fears at the door and found my forever home inside, the end.